people here were in danger and they were trying to get their attention. They weren't haunting the place. There was some unfinished business.
He's a really integral part of who you are and what you do and why you do what you do.
I was catching my breath and I thought, who is this powerful being that was their son? Both left signs before they passed that their soul knew they were going to pass. Just remembering who we are is heaven. But see, that's the point. We can remember here and now. We're not necessarily seeking eternal happiness. We're seeking peace. And that's at the eye of the storm. Shown to me in imagery that he was wrapped up like a cocoon and escorted by two angelic beings.
I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Suzanne Giesemann. How you doing, Suzanne?
Oh, Alex, always happy to sit with you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming back on the show. You are a world traveler now. You're all around the world, so that's why you couldn't make it down to the studios this time. Because a lot of people are like, she was there last time. How come? I wanted you on the show because I wanted to talk about the projects you're working on and go down some rabbit holes as we always do. But you're just too busy, so I completely understand. I'm glad we can make this work.
Me too.
So you have a film out called Wolf's Message, which is based on your book, your best-selling book. And I saw it. It's such a beautiful film. And it is, for someone who's uninitiated to what you do or that world, it's a beautiful introduction to the other side, into mediumship, into messages from loved ones. It is a beautiful, beautiful entry point, gateway.
And it's so much more because it's the main message is we are souls now.
Correct.
It's to open people up to the awareness with absolute proof that we are souls, that, oh my God, this world is not all there is. Lots
exactly. It's like, as Donkey would say in Shrek 2, it's like an onion. There's multiple layers. Multiple layers, just like Shrek. So tell me, we've spoken multiple times. I know you've mentioned this. I mean, we've been talking for 3 years, and we've had many conversations, so I can't really remember which one. I'm sure Wolf's Message, the book, came up at one point or another, but I really never knew the depth of what it is. So can you explain, Wolf is really, or Michael, he's known as Wolf. He's a really integral part of who you are and what you do and why you do what you do, correct?
Exactly. Years ago, I would have thought I'm a medium or a spiritual teacher, and I'll just share what I've come to know. But meeting Wolf helped me put the main messages that I know my soul came here to share into a cohesive ball of information that anytime anybody asks me a question, first I'm going to go to my guides and ask for the answer. But the go-to is the awakened way of living. I have a book called The Awakened Way, but the awakened way of living came from what Wolf came back from the other side to share with us. So he was the genesis of this way of living that helps us live a consciously connected life, a divinely guided life. He's the one that left proof that we are souls and are connected through the one big web all the time. He's the one that started this for me about 12 years ago. I've known there would be a movie, and I can tell you as we go along about several false starts. So this is the culmination of meeting his parents 12 years ago and being great friends with them now.
It's pretty remarkable. There's similarities between your daughter's way that she passed and Wolf's way that she passed. I mean, as I was watching the film, I was like, this is insane. Like the coincidences, how things happen. Can you kind of break down a little bit of why Wolf and your daughter's way they passed was so similar, and how you connected with Wolf's parents?
Yes.
It's all seems so magical, and
it is. And I use the word insane, magical, wondrous.
Sure.
All of these are feelings that people are going to have as they watch the film, because there is no other explanation than that there is a big web we're part of. And my stepdaughter Susan and Michael Wolf Passacarnes both passed in their late 20s. Susan was 27, Wolf was 29. Both passed very suddenly, unexpectedly. Both were struck and killed by lightning. Both left signs before they passed that their soul knew they were going to pass. Susan's was subtle. It was a dream visit where she came up to me very clearly and let me know that she was still okay. Wolf left profound evidence that comes out in the film and in my book that nobody can deny. He knew he was going to be struck and killed by lightning. He left a drawing and a poem that spoke of it, showed where it was going to happen and what would happen afterwards. That's just one little piece of the stunning evidence he left, how he set up his apartment so that people would see the poem and the drawing, how he cleaned his apartment, which was something he never did, and left it just right, as if he knew he wasn't coming back, because he did know at the soul level. There's so much of that in the film and more. But I met his parents at a conference where I was speaking. I'm on stage talking about my daughter struck by lightning, and this couple in the front row grabs their hands like her daughter died the same way our son did. I was the first person they met after Wolf was killed that knew anything about that. And that led Wolf's dad, Mike, to come up to me and say, how could my son know? If you watch the trailer, you see the two of us talking about that moment. How could he know? And the whole Wolf's message is the how.
The thing that was also fascinating is because you show in the film, I hear clips of you again, essentially talking to Wolf or hearing his messages come in, and I had never heard your voice shake. It almost seemed like you were the energy surge. The circuits weren't prepared for it, and they were kind of frying. They didn't fry you, but they definitely jolted you a lot, and you were kind of barely holding on from the voice that I heard multiple times in the film. Can you explain what that process was for you?
Yes, that is the actual recording that people will hear in the film of when I did a reading by probably Zoom. No, we didn't have Zoom. Skype. Way back 12 years ago, or whenever it was that we did it, 10 years. I'll have to look at the timeline. But because I remember I was looking at them on my computer, and I was just doing a regular reading, and I tuned in, and I knew they had a son who died, but I knew nothing other than that he was killed by a lightning strike. So I wanted to get to feel him, and I asked him to step in close so I could feel his energy. And he was the most powerful family member. I put it that way because I don't want to say soul. I've talked to souls who are masters and angels. They have very powerful energy. He was the most powerful family member I have connected with across the veil. So it was no different than just inviting in any higher being to merge with me so I can feel their energy. But his energy literally left me shaking. My heart was palpitating. I was catching my breath. And I thought, who is this powerful being that was their son?
So, you mean, Suzanne, you've been doing this for a few years now. So
15.
you have a lot of, yes, you have a lot of experience with this. What's your thesis, if you will, or your about
Thesis.
why do you think his specifically was so? I mean, if Jesus comes in, Buddha comes in, Archangel Michael comes in, completely understand the power of the energy of a master or an angel or something like that. But to have just someone who just passed come in with such a heavy, like such a powerful energy, why do you think he did it? I'm sure he did it for a reason, or is there no reason for it behind it? Why he came in so
Something
hot, if
he
you will?
did. It's not something he did. It's what his field is.
Period.
He didn't
Got it.
have to change it. That is Wolf's energy. And
Okay.
I've channeled a few messages that show that he is of the Archangel Michael lineage. It's unusual that he's Michael, his dad is Michael, and we have Archangel Michael here. That I know that he's some aspect of the Archangel Michael field that incarnated. I'm not saying he is Archangel Michael. I just know that that energy knew that through Wolf's story and the way he died, people would pay attention. And so that powerful energy came with him, and I felt it. I was just expecting somebody's normal family member, but instead is, what is this energy? And then that's why, now that you've watched the film, and anybody who's read the book knows this part, when he started giving me evidence about himself and his parents were validating that, I was totally knocked off balance when he said schizophrenia. And I said, I don't know why he's talking about schizophrenia. And his stepmother, Beth, said, oh, yes, he was diagnosed schizophrenic. And the disconnect between this powerful presence I was feeling, this loving being, this everybody, as you saw in the testimonials in the documentary, everybody who crossed paths with him commented about how loving and kind he was. That just didn't jibe with my concept of schizophrenia. So I asked him silently, what's that all about? And he said, I was in two worlds at once. It was very busy in here. He actually showed me that. And you see in the film how his dad said, yeah, he used to say that all the time, and even shows a picture of him going like this. And he said he just couldn't shut it off. And this is one of the layers of the film. It really sheds a new light on people who say they're hearing voices. It's not necessarily mental illness, or it reframes how we view mental illness. As he said, I was unable to operate on a normal basis while here, but there was nothing wrong with my heart.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because you were saying that Wolf could be from the lineage of Michael and these kind of things. One question I've always asked, I've had asked a lot, and I'd love for you to explain it to people, is if we're a soul, you and I are souls. Right now, we are wearing the Suzanne and Alex masks, suits, if you will, personalities, everything. We've had other lives that we were others, males, females, rich, poor, oppressor, oppressee, the whole thing. This is where people get confused because they associate it with our reality, where Wolf, on the other side is waking up in his apartment or house on the other side, gets up. I'm like, oh, I got to meet Suzanne over here because she's got a reading with my parents, and I got to get over here and I got to do that. Like, that's how they think they have to get on in a car and travel, where it doesn't work that way on the other side. How can our soul be split up into multiple personalities over courses of many lives, where sometimes they present themselves like here as Wolf, but maybe in a future incarnation or in a past incarnation, we're going down to quantum physics world as well. All lifetimes are happening at the exact same time. There is no past, there is no future, because there is no time on the other side. This is a deep, meandering question, Suzanne.
Not deep.
Okay.
It's not deep, but I'm going to try to explain
untangle what I just did.
Do you mind if I draw a diagram?
Please.
Okay.
That would help.
So
yes.
This paper would represent the entire sea of consciousness. And
it's a big paper.
here, yeah, it's big. So within it, there's an eddy, a little whirlpool here. And that would be a soul. We'll call it a soul, a pattern of consciousness that is recognizable because it goes round and round and round, but it's part of the whole sea. So right now, here's Alex, a pattern within the pattern. Most people tend to think soul, body, it's the whole thing. But no, in my understanding anyway, it's all a mystery. So this is the way I can conceive of it. So we call this Alex here. And there's the next level soul.
Very nice. Very nice.
So all of this and what's within the eddy is what we call the higher self. We're accessing information that's not normally in our conscious awareness here from what we call our soul. But you can see that this is a pattern within the entire sea. And so other lives that you've had, many people are familiar with the flower of life diagram, are just other eddies. I like drawing the spiral, which, as you saw in the film, was really important to Wolf. This is moving. This is dynamic. It's not just static. person or being. These are all the other incarnations, experiences, patterns of consciousness that the soul can be experiencing all at once. But we might experience them from the limited, restricted view within this eddy as one lifetime in a linear format. But it's really all happening at once. So say this is Wolf's soul. What if this is part of Archangel Michael's field? And somebody else's might be part of another lineage or pattern, or identify more as the Buddha lineage or the Jesus lineage. This is just really putting energy into pigeonholes. But if you've ever seen a picture of how a hologram works, like dropping a pebble into a tray of water and the ripples go out, if you froze that, you would see that all the ripples from all of the patterns in the tray of water interact. And that's how I, as a medium, can connect with the soul without having them truly come to me. Our intention activates that connection in awareness, and we're instantly communicating. If I say, step in and merge with me, I really think that's a concession to how we as humans think about things having to move and merge, when really it's just turning up the connection and awareness between me and other eddies.
That's a beautiful explanation. That's a beautiful explanation. Thank you for that. Since we're speaking about films, I'm assuming you remember the film Ghost. Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore.
Yep. I tell people a lot, that is what it's like being a medium, where Whoopi Goldberg has all these family members behind her. They're going like, I want to talk first. I want to talk.
That's what I was going to ask you. How, I mean, I know I've had Bruce on the show who wrote that, and if you hear his story, you understand why and how he wrote that, because of his own spiritual experiences. But how close, how accurate is that film in the sense of a soul having unfinished work to do? Obviously in the movie, sorry, spoiler alert, Patrick Swayze dies. He's on the other side, and he's trying to solve his own murder, and that kind of thing. Obviously, that's an extreme Hollywood, little bit version of it, but just souls who have unfinished work, who want to help the people who are living still because they're still connected. Even that whirlpool that you were just showing us, it's just one character, one incarnation, yet that incarnation is still attached to the living, because it's too soon in the time frame of when it left it's still attached to this realm in a way. So how accurate was that?
I wouldn't
Tell
say
me, explain it.
It's not a matter of time, Alex. It's a matter of the storyline still has potential for providing growth with the people that are connected to that story. So I normally
on both sides. On both sides.
I wouldn't connect to somebody's great grandmother, because there still exists as a pattern of energy, but the learning and growth is not as valuable as somebody who just passed. So how important is it for them to continue the story across the veil, unfinished business? That's going to depend on each storyline. But you brought to mind Mavis Patillo, one of my original mentors who became a friend and colleague. I wrote her biography called Droplets of God, and she tells two beautiful stories about people who thought that places were haunted because they were feeling cold energy and hearing banging noises, and cabinets were flying open. And in both cases, it was these beings who realized that people here were in danger and they were trying to get their attention. They weren't haunting the place. There was some unfinished business. They had ways they could still help us here. And so they made their presence known energetically. Fascinating stories. Well, just to show you what I'm talking about, where the cabinets were flying open, the couple was frightened that there's some ghost in the house. So they brought in Mavis, who could see the spirits. I don't see them standing in front of me like she did. And she said, why are you scaring this family? And the alleged ghost, who's just a spirit, a person that used to be in physical form and is no longer, said, I passed from a drug overdose. Their children have brought home dangerous drugs from school, and they're in the top of that cabinet. I want their parents to know they're there so the kids don't get in trouble and die the way I did. And they said, this is impossible. They went up on top of the cabinet and there it was. So, ghost stories, Hollywood, they want it to be a scary spirit who wants you out of the house, but in both of these
Angry.
stories, there was a heart-based reason that those souls took the story within the soul that used to be here in a physical body and said, let's continue the story and have it interact with the people here for a purpose.
So the learning, obviously that's helping the incarnated soul who's still on Earth. But it's also helping the other person who just died on the other side. Is there a growth opportunity for that soul, even though they're on the other side?
Yes, they could make a choice not to come back. Their growth opportunity is to do, rather than sit on a cloud playing a harp, which is just an analogy. They say, okay, I'll continue the story and we'll interact with this couple and I'm going to stay with it because that's a way I can still serve.
Suzanne, I know you made a joke about the harp in the cloud, which is an analogy, but that's another question I get asked all the time. What the heck do they do on the other
They
side? Is there coffee shops? Are there concerts? I mean, Prince and Michael are up there. I mean, that must be a pretty badass. Two of the Beatles are up there. There's a lot of great concerts you could go to up there.
You're kidding, but there are.
Yeah. So how
They
does it
sit
work up on the other
they
side?
sit in what you want to do is what you experience. I have a great video that I made of channeled answer to that question, the afterlife explained, I believe it's called. And you do when you immediately cross whatever unfinished business you want to do. Mostly if it's fun. For example, the woman's husband in spirit, when she asked me, what's he doing over there? And I asked him, he said, I'm standing firmly on 2 feet and playing golf every day. Now, doesn't that sound ridiculous? Why would you cross the veil and play golf every day? And she said, oh my gosh, golf was his passion, but he had his leg amputated before he passed and he couldn't golf anymore. So, what more beautiful evidence could you ask for than this spirit telling us, I'm standing firmly on 2 feet? Well, you don't have what we call a physical body and spirit. So you create one for the joy of it and you golf. But after a while, getting a hole in one all the time gets a little dull. So you say, okay, check. Now maybe I'll fly a plane. Always wanted to do that. And you find yourself flying. And as my guides told me in that channel session, suddenly you say, well, I don't need the plane. I'll just fly. So you have fun and you explore using consciousness to create, which is what consciousness does through us. In this reality, we use our bodies to do it, and it takes time, and cause and effect doesn't always play out as instantly as it does across the veil. Across the veil, you can multitask without getting exhausted, and you can visit multiple people at once.
Yeah, that's why I always say Jesus is the hardest working man in show business because he's had everyone's near-death experience. Because it's not just one Jesus running around to like, oh, John's dying. Oh, Bob's dying. Oh, I gotta go. That doesn't exist. There's no time. He could be in a billion places at the exact same time. Is that true? Any soul on the other side could do that?
No, let me just
You can't,
validate that.
can't be on multiple places at the same time.
Any soul can visit their immediate connections. So if you have a family of 5, you can look on all 5 at once. But what the guides have shown me is the higher beings, for example, angels are responsible for large sections of humanity. Archangels can help all of humanity at once. And Jesus is at the level of, as far as influence, of the archangels.
So he could be around the world at any time.
Answering all those souls that you were talking about. Yeah.
Right. The masters. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Is it kind of like I'll bring in another movie, What Dreams May Come, Robin Williams's beautiful film. He said something really interesting in that, or Cuba Gooding Jr., his son at the time, when he was there, he was trying to figure out why he had passed. And he said, in this place, there is enough space for everyone to have their own heaven. And as he started to understand that, he started to create his own reality. He started off as a painted world out of paint, and then it started to solidify. He's like, I would love to have a tree over there, and the tree this beautiful giant tree appears and things like that. Is that kind of the way it is on the other side?
It is very much just instantly creative. When you said heaven, it just snagged me. I love how this works, Alex. I get the daily messages from my guide that we publish in the Awaken Way app.
Mm-hmm.
Almost invariably, when I do a reading, the message I got that morning comes up in a relevant way in that reading. And this morning's message, you just brought it up. It's all about heaven and how heaven is really a state, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a place. Where is it? The last line. If I and my guides told me I need my glasses now. I know why. Oh, may I read it?
Jeez, please.
Yeah. So it's the app. I pulled up the latest message from today. Where is your loved one who has passed? Why, they are enjoying their new state of being, which is not new at all in the sense of rediscovering. They are eternal beings, just as you are. I love that word, rediscovering. We just forget. But now they have the added benefit of having had the most recent experience in a physical body. The love that you shared is a blessing that remains with them and now holds them tethered to you in the best of ways, in awareness. Aha, they say when they realize how close you are. I still see you and hear you, they exclaim with delight as they realize that you are still together, but on a different frequency. Now I understand, they say, and this understanding, which can be yours now as well, is heaven.
That's so beautiful.
It's so cool. It's one of the first times that Spirit's given me their perspective of someone who just passed. Usually it's they want us to know, talk to them, they hear you, but they're saying what it's like when you leave this body and you wake up and you say, wait, I still see them, and it's our hearts that's connecting us, and just remembering who we are is heaven. But see, that's the point. We can remember here and now. I've had so many moments this week of just overflowing with this awareness that you are love, which is my definition for God. God is love. I look at you, and when I see that, it changes how I see you and see everybody. That gift, I believe, comes from grace, because it's so easy to forget who we are.
So, Suzanne, as you've in the movie, this kind of was a little bit of interesting, and it happened to you as well. When you started down this path, you had no spiritual background before in the military, none whatsoever. So it was a process for you to kind of understand what was going on, and you were evidential, which is like, I need evidence. I need to really practice and see what's happening. But during your years of doing this, I'm assuming you've run into people who, when faced with this truth, that they're programming short circuits. They can't really wrap their head around it.
Sure.
It throws their entire world upside down because they had one story that they believed in all their life, and then that story now it's changed. But if that story changed, then it's a domino effect of 1,000 other things that they connect to that story. If someone's watching this right now whose brain is literally frying right now from this conversation, how did you deal with people? How did you deal with people who have you've run into over the years doing this? And what advice do you have for somebody who's watching this going, does not compute, but yet they're watching and they've made it to this point. So there's something going on.
That's it. That's what I say. And that's why I say good, because as I said in my book that's just coming out in June, if you're not making people squirm, you're not doing your job. And it's that discomfort that is the gift. Because if there was nothing to pay attention to, you'd just go along just with just nothing getting your attention. But the discomfort makes you stop, and then there's this innate curiosity that comes from the soul that wants to know why this doesn't sit well with me. So then you start rationalizing and coming up with ideas. So the advice is, be curious enough to say, what is my BS belief system that's causing me to just reject this out of pocket? What am I telling myself? And what if I were to just believe a little bit more. Open-minded skepticism is the key. Skepticism, it can be healthy.
Mhm.
So be open-minded. Was it Carl Sagan that said, be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brains fall out? We
He was
can
a great
use
man.
discernment, and that's where the evidence helps.
Yeah, and that's why I think Spirit has used you as a vessel all these years because of your background and adds so much legitimacy um to this work and to this space, because you were not a woo-woo, hippie, back in the day. You were the complete opposite of that at the
Yep.
highest levels to get to the point where you are now. I have to ask you, if you met yourself around the time of, before 9/11, let's say before 9/11, because you were at the height of your military station at that point,
Yes.
what would you have said? What would have been the conversation between Suzanne now and that Suzanne?
The old me would look at me now and say, wow, I wish I'd met you sooner. You're so calm and joyful, and you really love people. How do I
Yeah.
get there faster? That's what I would
Mhm.
say.
That's really so she wouldn't have just said, "Are you nuts?"
Oh, no,
No.
I would have been
So she was
really envious. Really envious.
really, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Because there was
Because,
because
yeah.
this Suzanne that's speaking to me was inside of that Suzanne.
Oh, sure.
She
Every possibility is latent within all of us. And
Right, exactly. So it was within you, that possibility. So I guess that would make sense that you would react not the way I would think you would react like, are you nuts? Like, what have you been smoking something, Suzanne from the future? You know, it would be more like, wow, like she would have observed who you've become, who she would become, and just go, oh, how do I get there faster? That's how she would react it.
yeah, I like that you were surprised by that answer. And I love that I didn't have a chance to think of it before, but there's no doubt. I had a lot of normal human fears and doubts and no tools to cope with them at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I'd imagine and imagine the high stress environment you were in
I was
was.
telling people that I was just putting together a slide for I'm taking a large group on a cruise in about 10 days. And I had a picture of me talking to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, my boss, and because he's 6'5" and I'm 5'7", and I'm looking at him like this, saying, "This is what we're going to do, General." And it looks like I have the ear of the head of the whole United States Armed Forces, and I did. But what's really funny is the next picture where he's looking at me like, "Whose brilliant idea was that?" And so it was always that look that you were like, "Oh, please, God, let me stay out of trouble. Let me not screw up." There was always an underlying fear of missing something, forgetting something, raising his ire for whatever reason. The best advice I was ever given was by his senior enlisted aide. He said, "Whatever you do, don't make any excuse, never make any excuse to the chairman." And there was one time where I screwed up and I could give him the many reasons why. And he called me into his cabin on the aircraft and he's going, rah, 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 rah. And I wanted to say, "But General, I didn't know that, I didn't." And I remembered that advice and I said, "Yes, sir, no excuse, sir." Just like boot camp, right? I'm a commander in the Navy. "Yes, sir, no excuse, sir." And he said, "All right, then let's get on with it." I would have been fired on the spot. I know it if I'd made an excuse, but good human guidance saved me. My point being, fear all the time. And I think a lot of people can identify with that human. What if I screw up? I don't want to look stupid or look bad. Now, trust spirit so much to guide me moment by moment. If I feel any fear, it stands out and I say, "Hey, how can we do this better? What's going on here?" I just constantly tune into guidance.
What is one of the common ways that the other side tries to communicate with their loved ones on this side?
Well, they're putting thoughts in our head all the time and we think they're ours. Like, like, "Oh, I think I'll go get my nails done now." And you go get your nails done and you end up sitting next to somebody who also just lost their mother. Mom knew that. She could see, she's been talking to that person's mother in spirit. "Oh, let's bring them together. They'll support each other." Well, I know she wants to do her nails. Why don't we put the thought in her head, go get your nails done now? People
Wow.
don't realize the web of connections. Oh, Alex, making this film, everybody that's involved has been getting signs from their loved ones across the veil. And a lot of us have children across the veil. The director, Jim Spruill, has a son, Dakota, across the veil. There is zero doubt that Mike and Beth's son, Wolf, my daughter, Susan, and Jim's son, Dakota, have been guiding this project from the very beginning. My assistant, Christy, her daughter, Tess, helping her with help me. It's the web is so evident. And I hope that as people watch this film and open up to how this works, they'll start noticing their thoughts are not their own.
Well, and there are people who are like, what? You know, their ego might get in the way and go, what? No, these are all my thoughts. I like how, like,
Exactly.
I'm the genius.
Now, how can they be just your thoughts if
Right.
all this energy information is just constantly spiraling and picking up from the one field?
So
Sorry,
when,
ego.
yeah, exactly. So Suzanne, when we lose somebody, we become, generally speaking, and everyone's different, obviously, but generally, we become obviously sad, and many of us become disconnected from, our data. The suffering is so much, the grief is so much. What advice do you have for people who are feeling disconnected and want to recognize and trust the messages that are coming in? Because when you're in this whirlpool of maybe anger, sadness, grief, trauma, all this, shadow work that that person's death might have brought up for you, and all of this kind of stuff, when you're in that whirlpool, which many of us do go through, how can we stick our head up above that whirlpool and hear?
I love that you gave me that imagery because I have a dear friend, Karen Crawford, who puts my thoughts into beautiful artwork. And I gave her a concept and she drew it. It's this swirling whirlpool, and this star is shooting out of the middle of it from the center, the eye of the storm. And it's just stepping out of that. What makes us miserable is we're contrasting what we feel in the moment with the joy we felt in the past. And this is the joy that comes from the soul. We want that again. We know there is something more than this pain. That's the underlying joy with a capital joy that's always part of all of us, that we all share. We're not necessarily seeking eternal happiness, we're seeking peace. And that's at the eye of the storm. And I point to the heart because that's the center of us. If when we're caught up in the storm, we can just take that awareness, I'm miserable, and take a deep breath and visualize, find analogies that help you. Visualize yourself jumping beyond that and talking to your loved one. See what happens if you just talk to them. That in itself will just divert you from the thoughts that are holding you prisoner. And now in that moment, use my 3 E's. Educate yourself about your loved one's new way of being by watching shows like this, by reading about near-death experiences, by watching my videos about the afterlife. Educate yourself. Now you'll start to feel more connected. Now experience expanded states of awareness. Experience how your thoughts are holding you down by listening and watching, and then engage your loved ones across the veil in a conversation, but leave enough space to listen how they answer. Experience, educate, engage.
So, for people who are listening to this conversation and are scared of communicating with someone from the other side, what advice do you have them for dealing with that? Because again, Hollywood has programmed us to be very afraid of ghosts and be very afraid of the other side. And it's always this, poltergeist kind of scenario
Yeah. Yeah.
where you and I have been discussing in this, and your whole work is about how much love there is on the other side and how much how they love you. They want to help you. They're trying to guide you kind of thing. But what advice do you have for someone who can't get over the fear of what they have been taught in their own programming?
First, to actually ask yourself, do you even know what you are afraid of? And it's mostly afraid of being afraid. Of course, the ultimate fear is dying and all of this what we're conversing about today shows that there is no ultimate death of the self. The physical body absolutely dies, but we're afraid of being afraid. I have a dear friend who I taught my sip of the divine meditative practice, my 3-minute practice. And she said, I couldn't even sit for 3 minutes because I was so afraid that the waves of grief of my daughter's passing would overwhelm me like they do over and over and over. I was stuck until I just got so sick of it. I said, all right, I'll sit. So she sat and she was quiet for about 30 seconds. And here came the wave, but she had given up. And she said it got up to her like this and it went poof. And she was shocked. And she sat there and she said, it didn't kill me. It didn't hurt me. Oh my God, what's left now? I can breathe. And then from then on, she sat quietly for 3 minutes a day, the sip of the divine, and she started talking to her daughter. And now she hears from her, and her daughter warns her of things she needs to know about. And she has a great relationship with her daughter across the veil. That's just one example. But if I could ramble a little,
Please.
I was awaken in the middle of the night. I know I was awake, and I sensed these beings. It was kind of like the Wizard of Oz, but worse. It was these flying beings with giant talons. I don't have experiences like this too often, coming right at me like this. And it was real physical fear.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to say to my guides, what the heck? What's going on? Help me here. And they said, send them love, because love is going to dissolve everything. Love is the light. Love is the highest vibration. So now they're here and I can feel these talons on my neck. And I knew it. Nothing is real except pure being, consciousness. I knew this was consciousness doing this for some reason. And so I said, I love you. Don't know who you are, why you're here. I'm sending you love. And Alex, as silly as this all sounds, this was not a dream. It was an experience. It was like the Wizard of Oz, where the witch goes and it just went away. And it's one of those moments where I look at my guys and I say, really? What was that all about? And right now they're saying, you're our guinea pig. Now you sharing that with a million people, right? Now other people will say, that's ridiculous. Well, next time something frightens you, if you have the nerve to look at it and shine your light, just say, nothing can kill me that arises in awareness. It disappears.
So Suzanne, I'm not sure if that helped people who are afraid. But I'm not really sure if that helped that situation. But with that said, that is now it kind of it sparked another question.
Okay.
These beings, these things with the claws and all that kind of stuff. We've all had bad dreams. Everyone's had bad dreams.
Consciousness. It can't hurt you. That's my point.
I understand that. I get that. But is there negative beings on the other side? And if there are, what are they? How are they? What is the purpose of them on the? Because I get that here.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear on the other side.
Okay. Yes, there are less than positive thought forms. And what are you? A thought form. We call us a person because we have a body and personality, but we're a thought form. Everything that was ever created in consciousness is a pattern of energy information. It's consciousness. And so there are thought forms that are a very dense, low vibration. And because they're part of consciousness, some of them can affect us more than others. So I know that recently I had the personal experience of having a conversation with someone, and that person was ranting at me. I triggered something in them, and they ranted at me, and it affected me so badly that I had to go to my energy healer friend and say, what's gotten into me? I'm not able to identify it. And she taught me how to identify this and get rid of it, but she helped me release this thought form. Some people would call that an attachment. That's a good word for it because it really gunked me up for a day or two. And that could be scary if you don't know what's going on. But anything that causes you discomfort is energy. You are an energetic being. Your superpower is the free will to make a choice and say, I am the light. Ultimately, I'm going to bring in the light to dispel this darkness. And it works.
In speaking of darkness and on the other side, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your guides' thoughts on the concept of hell and a negative place where people go, because a lot of people are afraid of a hellish afterlife. I'd love to hear from your point of view, who, you have a foot in both worlds. What is your take on it?
I asked my guides that question early on in this journey, and it is a state of consciousness, not a place. Just like that message that I read to you earlier, that heaven is remembering I am the light. I am an expression of the one source that we all share. So hell is so completely forgetting that you're feeling despair all the time, or having made such choices in this lifetime that you cause pain to others, feeling the full effect of that when you cross the veil, being surrounded by love, but not being able to access it until you resolve and reconcile the choices you made. That's a hell of your own making.
Is that why certain near-death experiencers and it's a rare thing, it's a very small percentage, go through a hellish experience, as opposed to the 99% that is very positive?
I don't have the personal experience in that, but as I ask the question now, the guides tell me there is a vibration that exists, and the person's energy can pick up on that as it's passing to the more expanded states where we reside. It's not a place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's here now. And so you're experiencing the fullness of being once you no longer have a body. And some people pick up on that as they go through it.
It's interesting too that at least the ones I've interviewed, is that even if they do go through a hellish experience, they come out of it. They're either saved by an angel, they're saved by Jesus, they're saved by someone like that, because they eventually ask for help. That's all they need to do. Is the
That free
second
will.
they go, yeah, help me, and then it just like this, and the dark energies scatter like roaches when the lights are turned on. They just
There's
can't
an image.
handle the light. Yeah. But the light, when the light appears, they can't handle it, and they take off. Again, going back to that film Ghost, the dark energies that bring down the bad guys into a hellish, I mean, that was first of all terrifying back in the 90s. Those visual effects were and the sound it made. I still remember the sound of those creatures is so visceral, so beautifully done. That it sounds a little bit like that when I hear these near-death experiences. It sounds similar to what those creatures were, like these entities just kind of pulling on you, things like that. It's all this negative, but it is a state of mind, and you can get out of it easily.
It is a state of mind, but you can get out of it through changing the pattern of thoughts in your whirlpool. I can give you one. I have had two similar examples where I brought through two men who were truly evil when they were here in physical form. And I'm glad it was only two. People say, aren't you scared when you do mediumship? No, because I wouldn't hang around with these people here, and I'm not hanging around with them when I do my readings. But this, in two separate back-to-back readings, my client's father was brought in. But unlike everybody else's father, this one was shown to me in imagery that he was wrapped up like a cocoon and escorted by two angelic beings who were very loving. And I said, what's going on here? And we'll call them angels, said, he is not allowed to speak yet. And yet we want to show his daughter that she will not have to face him when she crosses the veil. We are working with him. And I said, I'm sensing from these beings your father was a monster. And it turns out she'd written a book, and in the introduction, it said, my father was a monster. So the key point here is he was not allowed to, say, mix in with the general population, but he was being ministered to by loving beings. And the contrast he was allowed to feel between what he did to other people and what was available all the time, this love and the care and compassion, was something that now he had to process with his consciousness before his story, his little Eddie, was allowed to expand again into the entire sea of consciousness.
So, and again, because of the near-death experiences I've spoken to, and the ears I've spoken to, the life review, which you've spoken about as well. The life review is the closest we're going to get to judgment, but it's not judgment from the other side. It's our own self-judgment of what we did.
Right.
And for people who don't know what it is when you die, your life review, your entire life goes in front of you, but you get to feel how you made other people feel, both positive and not so positive.
Right. So here's this father who's basically held, wrapped up in like a mummy up to here. It was just imagery, so I could make sense of what was going on energetically. But these two loving beings, and they're saying, you're going to watch it all. You're going to see how you affected your daughter and everybody else with your actions. And now, what choices do you make about that? But to
So,
feel it.
so someone like, look, you haven't lived the perfect life. I haven't lived the perfect life. We've all done things that we wish that, negative things, as we grew. Um, hopefully nothing major, but generally speaking, everybody here that walks the earth goes through both sides because that's what we do. That's why we're here.
Right.
When you and I cross over, there's going to be scenes that we're going to look at in our life review, go, oh, I could have done that better. Oh man, I was young. Oh God, that kind of stuff. I didn't mean to hurt her. That
Yeah,
kind of
well, I
stuff.
hope we're doing it now. And I hope that anybody watching this program realizes do it now. And you don't have to do that when you cross the veil.
Exactly. You do that work now. You're absolutely right. So that I'm using us as an example, but someone who was, Mao, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, these historical figures who Napoleon, these that just mass murder, so much damage, so much pain that they inflicted on the world. When they go to the other side, there is a life review. They have to feel it. You're the first time I've ever heard this kind of cocoon idea where like you're not allowed in general population, not for a punishment, but because you need time to decompress in a decompression chamber to process what you've done, and the bigger the more not positive choices you've made, the more processing you have to go through. And I love the way you said minister, kind of like you're in a counselor's room, and there's a social worker there helping you work through it, or a psychiatrist or psychologist helping you work through it on the other side in that cocoon. What happens to these souls who inflict a tremendous amount of mass damage onto humanity? What is their experience when they cross over? Because I know that's a question that so many people have, like, well, what happened to this guy? What happened to that guy?
Well,
When they
that's
cross
going to be
over.
processing that for, in our human terms, what we would say is many, many lifetimes. But they're not allowed back into this incarnation, that story. But again, this is part there, that little whirlpool there is one of those beings, and it's a much greater soul. So there's a lot of patterns here that need to be reworked before it's going to come back again. Does that make
Right.
sense? Yeah.
It just you need processing. You need to process. It's kind of like when you've dealt with trauma in your life, you've dealt with pain in your life. You have to process that in order to be able to function in society again. Here, just
You've
on an earthly
you've
world.
reminded me of a story that's so powerful. It's a little bit
Tell
of a
me.
tangent, but I had a client who her father and her uncle came in the reading and showed tremendous abuse of her and sexual abuse and horrible things that had caused her to have a psychotic break, have a really rough life here. And but she was very matter of fact about it. She'd really been dealing with her stuff. And I said, the guides are showing me that your father and uncle would like you to do a session where you really let it all out, shout at them, curse at them, say everything you'd like to say, and they will be there present while you do this purging process. They are ready to feel the full brunt of your emotions and to accept responsibility for the pain they caused to you, if you want to do that. And so she did, but she took a counselor with her in a Zoom session. She set the computer in the room, and she had a tall lamp that represented her father and a small, shorter lamp that represented her uncle. And she just railed at him, and she's cursing and crying. And she said, all of a sudden, he saw them in the corner of the room. And then she saw her mother in spirit, who had turned a blind eye to all of the abuse. And she said, suddenly, she felt their regret, and all of her hatred and anger and shame dissolved. She realized we are all souls. They made in their human incarnations, they made poor choices, but she saw where it led her to. She had this spiritually transformative experience that transformed her so much. She literally shed 100 pounds with no diet, no effort. Yeah, it was all that protection that she had added to her body from the pain. She purged it by knowing they were right there. And can you see how that would help them too, across the veil?
Is that why and I don't want to go down too deep the rabbit hole, but I love what you just said, the protection of someone who has extra weight on them. And some are so extreme. There's shows like, half a ton, I mean, literally people who weigh 1,000 pounds. The pain that they have to be in to need that much protection, is that from former lives, or is that stuff that they're dealing with in this life, or both?
Well, I'm asking the guides that question. They don't want us to be blaming past lives. It's all about taking responsibility in this life. So what you're experiencing now, physical, emotional, or anything, is from your choices now. Don't worry about the past.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Suzanne, after all the years you've been doing this, and coming from the background that you've come from, what is the most surprising part of the work that you do, or the work that you've done over the course of the last 15 years? What has just taken you kind of by, like, really?
I would say what's surprising is that spirit never fails to surprise me. And my poor husband, he says, I'll ask for a sign to this day. I don't need to know the spirit world is real, but I love playing the sign game that I talk about in a lot of my teaching, where you say, hey, that was really cool what you just taught me. If that's something I can trust, show me this sign. And last week they gave me this really cool lesson and told me I was going to have this spirit animal helping me to overcome this pattern that I'd brought forward. And still to this day, the Navy commander says, really, a spirit animal that's going to help me? And I said, all right, what am I going to call this spirit animal? Just playing. That's what I want people to be willing to play. And I heard Lucy, because this guide is going to help me remain lucid. So that's clever. So I'm going to see the name Lucy, huh? And they said, not only will you see it, but you will hear it in the form of Lucille Ball. And so it was two different things. I was going to see Lucy, and I was going to have some connection with Lucille Ball. So that night I go to bed, and I always have 5 books on the go at once. And I was just guided to open up one on my Kindle, and I'm just leafing through. My husband's brushing his teeth, and I turn the page, and there's Saint Lucy. And I just go, that's what surprises me, that I still get surprised when these signs happen. And the very next day, I'm talking to my friend Lynette, and she says, you got to watch this, listen to this podcast. They bring in Lucille Ball. And I said, of course they did. Of course they did. Who put that thought in Lynette's head? The web, Alex. And that's what this Wolf's Message video shows us. That's Wolf's message. You're not only human, you're part of this big web of consciousness. And love is the consciousness. Love means lack of separation. Nothing is separate. it just appears that way. When you come to know that, you feel the love, you feel the connection, you open to the wonder and the magic, and life does not become one big joyous moment. It's not all happy, but you know it's there, just waiting.
Hmm. The one thing I found very funny in the documentary was your husband Ty, when he had to actually look up. He had no idea what a medium was when it was
Yeah.
first presented to him. He had to like look it up, and it took him years to tell you that, apparently.
And now he's married to one. He did not sign up for this at the human level. At the soul level, it's a plan. It's such a good sport to go on camera. And Alex, he cries. We've watched the film 6, 7 times now as it's come together. And we're taking it on tour around the US, 30 different screenings and discussion events around the country.
Beautiful.
You can find the tour at wolfsmessage.com, attend a screening. Every time we've watched it, he cries. And he's not a crier. He doesn't cry any other time except when we talk about his daughter Susan dying. And I just think, I hope he's going to be okay with this 30 times watching this over and over.
It's gonna be a trying time for him. From someone who's done the whole festival thing, done screenings, and watching the same movie again and again and again. Tell him he better strap in.
Yeah, yeah. He can't sit there in the audience and read the news, right?
Right. Not a good sign. Not a good sign at all. Um, since our last conversation, I have just a couple of new final questions I always ask people, but I'll kind of go through a few of them again, because every time I ask you the question, I get a different answer, which is beautiful because Spirit comes in with a different answer. So,
Yeah, yeah.
what is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
That would be when you are following your heart and you know it.
Beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Suzanne, what advice would you give her?
You are safe and loved, and you're not alone.
How do you define God or source?
Wow. How do I define God or source in this moment? Wow. This, I could go deep, short, not deep,
Go
shallow. How do I
wherever you like to
define
go.
God? God is not a being. God is an energy that flows through and is everything that exists. And it's all present, all powerful, and indivisible. And therefore, God is love.
And what is love?
As I said previously, it's the awareness of no separation.
And if you could ask God or source one question, what would it be?
How am I doing?
Good question. And finally, what is the ultimate purpose of life?
Oh, see, the ultimate purpose of life in human form, I trust, is to create and evolve. The ultimate purpose of life is for God to express this full potential that just has to come out, to create.
Beautifully said. Where can people find out more about you, your work, and where to watch Wolf's Message and pick up your new book coming out in June and all of that stuff?
Yeah, SuzanneGiesemann.com. There's a lot just on the homepage, including harnessing new technology to get answers to the questions you might have about all of this. Under the banner are always my featured events where we can meet in purpose. I'm going to be in Atlanta at an Expand conference at the Omega Institute again this summer for Making the Connection workshop. And then these multiple screenings around the country, all right there on my homepage, SuzanneGiesemann.com. Lots of free gifts and resources on there, along with my courses. But then wolfsmessage.com has the trailer for the film and where you can attend a screening and how, if you're patient, you'll get to watch it online.
Suzanne, I think I found someone who's busier than me. So you've got a lot going on this year.
Yes, I do.
A light worker's job is never done, my dear. So
As long as it's fun, and it is fun. And this is another key. When you learn to trust spirit, you just say, what do I work on next? What's next? So I don't feel overwhelmed. I get really close sometimes, but the flow is just phenomenal. And I want that for everybody, Alex. So thank you for helping me share that message.
of course. And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
It's the same one my guides always end their daily message with. you are so very loved. If we knew that, we wouldn't do silly things to get love. We really are loved because love is our essence.
Suzanne, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. I love our conversations, and I really hope that this conversation helps people around the world watching it. So thank you so much. Congratulations on your film, your new book coming out, and all the amazing work you're doing in the world. I appreciate you very, very much, my dear. Thank you again. Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.